Okay, everyone. Fred of Future Engineering Bets. Today we're talking hydrogen fuel cells and whether or not they're a sound bet in automotive. So in the past, and I can say it honestly as someone who's worked 7 years in a hydrogen fuel cell capacity, hydrogen fuel cell was penned as the replacement of battery electric vehicles. What it comes down to fundamentally is it never seems to get quite close enough to reality. I remember when people were obsessed with hydrogen fuel cell becoming available for light duty work and being better than batteries, but batteries have already progressed to the point where nothing else could compete with them. Some call it this constant chicken and egg issue with hydrogen. You can't put hydrogen vehicles out on the road until there's the infrastructure to refill them. And because no one will put the infrastructure out to refill them, you can't put cars out on the road. It's a chicken and egg situation. Okay, everyone. Fred of Future Engineering Bets, where we look at what capital investors, private equity firms and OEMs are investing in, particularly in the automotive space, motorsport and defense. But today we're talking hydrogen fuel cells and whether or not they're a sound bet in automotive. So currently in automotive, we've got the great EV recalibration, which I've done another Future Engineering Bets episode on. But today we're talking hydrogen fuel cell. Now, the markets have seen a real shift in hydrogen fuel cell support over the last couple of years, particularly in the last year, both in automotive, in aerospace, and other applications. And we'll get into a bit about why that is. But for me, it's very much around the ongoing challenges with logistics of ensuring that there's hydrogen available, that the cost of that hydrogen is reasonable compared to other fuels, that the cost of the systems is reasonable compared to other powertrains. And when you add it all together, the lightweight aspects of hydrogen fuel cell are struggling, and it leaves hydrogen fuel cell looking like its only real market, maybe in the future, is in trucking and maybe other large heavy duty things like marine. So in the past, and I can say it honestly as someone who's worked 7 years in a hydrogen fuel cell capacity, delivering programs and demonstrators in aerospace, automotive, material handling, or laptops, hydrogen fuel cell was penned as the replacement of battery electric vehicles. It would be better than an EV because you could refill it quicker, but it's still super clean at tailpipe. Now, some people argue that most of the hydrogen currently being consumed is made from the process of turning oil into petrol. So it's dirty hydrogen in the sense that it's not coming from a green source. But really, what it comes down to fundamentally with hydrogen fuel cell is it never seems to get quite close enough to reality. I know I did studies in it in 1999, 2000, 2001. I was part of a team that put a hydrogen fuel cell airplane in the sky in 2008 and 9. And I can tell you that it's always a few yards from being reachable. I remember when people were obsessed with hydrogen fuel cell becoming available for light duty work and being better than batteries, but batteries have already progressed to the point where nothing else could compete with them. Now, when we move into transport and we move into other aspects of automotive, the complications over logistics, getting the fuel available, getting the infrastructure set up in place is massive, and it's not to be ignored. Some countries are a bit further forwards. Countries like Germany have really tried. But what we're going to go through now is some points that really cover off why hydrogen suits large, heavy-duty applications. It doesn't really suit anything else right now. And if you were placing your bets and you're thinking you're in tier 1, tier 2, do you really put into hydrogen? I'd probably not go into it. So from an investor and a PE perspective, some call it this constant chicken and egg issue with hydrogen. You can't put hydrogen vehicles out on the road until there's the infrastructure to refill them. And because no one will put the infrastructure out to refill them, you can't put cars out on the road. It's a chicken and egg situation. Sadly, even where there's been hydrogen programs that should be well contained, such as buses, even those are being parked up and written off because of the logistics of running the refuelers and everything else becomes so complex and it's difficult that everyone ends up walking away. And there's a good example up in Scotland of that within the last 6 months, which was really disappointing from a hydrogen fuel cell demonstrator program. So right now, if your hydrogen application isn't closed loop, as in you've got control of it, maybe it's an airport, maybe it's a warehouse, it's something that you can have everything that just goes round and round and round, you can plop more hydrogen in, you can refill it, then it's going to struggle right now. So fleets of trucks running between two specific points, great. If it's just generally running around the road, where would you refill a hydrogen truck? Now, I do think hydrogen's got good application potential for trucking in the future, but the total cost of ownership barrier has always been a problem. And fundamentally, the amount of work going into batteries and the amount of good stuff coming in from other countries like China will drive down the cost to the point where hydrogen constantly struggles to compete on a like-for-like basis as an investable use of powertrain technology. So you could say capital is fleeing the automotive markets. And like I said, there's other things that maybe in shipping, there's still aspects of aviation that you could fill up with hydrogen and run around for a while with things. I was involved in APUs, which is auxiliary power units in hydrogen fuel cell back in 2008-9 as well. And there are future benefits to it, but it's not there now. So let's pick up on some of the OEMs that have been playing with hydrogen fuel cell and still do. BMW and Toyota are probably the most prominent. They still have plans, and BMW want to produce a car, FCEV car, FCB fuel cell, for 2028. Of course, where will it drive? They're not banking that they're going to sell gazillions of the things. They're not daft. BMW, a pretty savvy company. And their long-term partnership with Toyota means they develop this together in partnership. But ultimately, they're trying to keep this alive as a potential pathway, whilst the other ones and most of the rest of the industry are backing out of it. If we take Stellantis, they pretty much halted their passenger hydrogen program, and they're shifting their focus and shifting the capital from hydrogen R&D back into flexible engine platforms, hybrids, different kinds of things. Again, really the lack of a European-wide refueling network makes hydrogen fuel cell vehicles kind of irrelevant. It's easier to set up charging networks than it is to set up hydrogen networks right now. Honda is another example. They had dealings in fuel cell vehicles. They even had a lease trial thing on in Japan and in California, but they've parked it on ice until at least 2030 and said, let's have a look again then. I know there's also been a big pullback in aviation, and people developing aviation fuel cell systems have also seen a pretty bad year, and there's been redundancies in lots of companies. So you'd really say this, it's not just automotive. If other industry sectors are suffering as well, then their overall belief in hydrogen is running low. Now, there's other aspects to hydrogen that's always going to be a problem. The energy density of hydrogen is very low compared to other fuels, which means if you have it as a gas, it needs to be very high pressure, which then needs high pressure tanks and other safety considerations around that. And then the other option is liquid hydrogen, which needs cooling to very, very low temperatures and comes with a big energy cost of maintaining the fuel in a liquid form at those low temperatures. So that energy density always hits hydrogen. If you use hydrogen to power an aircraft, you'd need another thing the size of the fuselage to hold the hydrogen, and that's how much fuel you might need to run an aircraft on it. When you're looking at hydrogen, you've still got the issue that logistically moving hydrogen around is expensive compared to moving other fuels around, which makes it then a cost more per mile compared to other fuels. There's just all these hurdles always in the way of hydrogen as a fuel and hydrogen fuel cell as a technology. And there's been a lot of work in the last 20, 30 years into the longevity of fuel cell stacks. And that is all the fuel cell components and cells mounted together to make one overall stack that gives you the power module. But there's still high cost compared to other technology counterparts. And the longevity in the real world applications still not where it needs to be, really, in terms of what you would bet against an ICE, an internal combustion engine, or an EV. Now, I do believe that when you get into the trucking sector, as well as hybrid electric trucks, hydrogen does offer a practical solution to HGVs, particularly if every service station along the motorways has a hydrogen refueler. That's not so complicated to do compared to getting it into every single car garage in the land, and that you're running from the ports through to the main delivery hubs, up and down the motorways. It is a practical way to take it forwards. And I will say, separate side note, HGV, heavy trucking using electric EV batteries only, is a nonsense. And all the demonstrators in that, in my opinion, are a phenomenal waste of good taxpayers' money. It's never going to work for a number of reasons I'll go into on another episode. But for me, that is a great application for hydrogen fuel cell is HGV trucks. So you've been with me, Fred, of Future Engineering Bets. I operate in advanced engineering, particularly automotive, motorsport and defense. working with private equity, capital investors, and boards, CEOs to look at where they invest their capital, to work out their future R&D, as well as providing operating strategic intervention and making sure the business, the enterprise value is fundamentally protected. Tune into another episode. Do subscribe and follow and share this with somebody if you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.